Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Committee on Housing and Economic Development. My name is Senator Chip Curry and serve as the Senate Chair. Thank you for your patience between our absences and fire drill. We now have quorum, so we'll get started. On our agenda today is one public hearing, LD 2057, and 3 work sessions. LDs 1995, 1921, and 1806. And I think we're going to go right in order on those. I have had a request for caucuses to meet right after the public hearing. So that is our plan for today. And I will ask members to introduce themselves, and we'll start from this side because I see someone is chewing. Please, we often come right from one thing to the next, so please don't be offended by us eating. We're really just trying to make it through. So we'll go from that side.
Hi there. My name is Cassie Julia, and I represent HD 65, which is half of Waterville.
Hi, my name is Amanda Collimore. I represent House District 68, Pittsfield, Clinton, Burnham, and Troy.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tracy Gear. I represent House District 134, which is all of Kennebunkport and coastal Kennebunk and Biddeford, and I'm the House Chair of the committee.
Again, I'm Senator Chip Curry, and I represent the 26 rural, coastal, and island communities of Waldo County.
Good afternoon. I'm Yusuf. I represent District 118, part of Portland.
Good afternoon. I'm Mark Mallon. I represent House District 133, part of the great city of Biddeford.
My name is Arthur Mingo. I represent District 9, 9 beautiful communities in eastern Washington County.
Excellent. And at this point, I will hand the gavel over to the chair to begin the the House Chair to begin the public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I will now open the public hearing for LD 2057 and invite our esteemed Chair Curry up to present the bill.
Representative Gear and distinguished colleagues of the Joint Standing Committee on Housing and Economic Development. Again, I'm Chip Curry. I represent Senate District 11. Thank you for your opportunity to present LD 2057, an act to support rehabilitation and development of affordable manufactured housing communities. This is a department bill from the Maine State Housing Authority, and I'm honored to be the sponsor. The goal of this bill is simple: to ensure our limited public housing dollars go further and to allow Maine Housing to finance more affordable housing projects across the state. This bill does this in 2 straightforward ways. First, it updates Maine law to keep pace with federal affordable housing programs. Historically, certain affordable housing projects, those that are under what's called the 4% LIHTC programs, require seeking federal low-income housing tax credits have been required by federal statute to have a Maine State Housing Authority finance the federal of 60% of construction loans. I just spoke with Maine Housing, and that might have been 50%, and he'll explain in detail what the difference is between the 60 and 50%. Under current Maine state law, when this is the case, Maine Housing may make the entire construction loan. Recent federal changes have reduced the percentage of required funding by Maine Housing to 25%. This bill replaces the outdated state threshold by tying Maine's rules directly to the federal standard, eliminating unnecessary steps that add cost and delay. Second, the bill clearly allows Maine Housing to make construction loans to privately owned or cooperatively owned manufactured housing communities, including mobile home parks for rehabilitation or the addition of new home sites. As you are well aware, these communities are an important source of naturally affordable housing, especially in rural areas, and helping preserve and modestly expand them in one of the most cost-effective ways to address our housing shortage. LD 2057 does not create a new housing program or loosen oversight. All existing underwriting standards and board review remain in place. At the end of the day, this bill is about efficiency and impact. By removing unnecessary barriers and clarifying authority, we allow Maine Housing to stretch public dollars further and support more housing projects for Maine people. Thank you for your time. I would be happy to answer any questions, but I understand representatives from Maine Housing are here and they will be far better at answering any technical questions.
Thank you, Chair Curry. Questions from the committee? Representative Collmore.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Senator, for bringing this to us. Is this a bill that you came up with or that Maine Housing approached?
This is from Maine Housing.
Okay, thank you.
They established this. So this is in the sense that they're a quasi-department bill.
Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thanks very much. And I'm going to, make sure that we're able to clarify the bill as much as possible. I'm going to invite Eric Jorgensen from Maine Housing up to provide his testimony.
Good afternoon, Senator Curry, Representative Gear, members of the Joint Standing Committee on Housing and Economic Development. It's nice to be back here. I'm Eric Jorgensen. I'm Senior Director of Government Relations and Communications at the Maine State Housing Authority, and I'm submitting this testimony in support of LD 2057. This bill amends Maine Housing's existing construction lending activity in two ways. First, it will allow us to conform with improvements in the federal low-income housing tax credit laws made possible as part of the President's 2025 reconciliation bill, which you might know as the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. And second, it allows us to provide financing options to manufactured housing community owners if they wish to add residences or expand their communities. That reflects a recommendation that came from the LD 1765 group, a work group to support infill and expansion of mobile home parks. And that recommendation was included in the report you received from GOPIF last week. So a little bit about our construction lending. Historically, Maine Housing has operated with statutory restrictions on our ability to make construction loans. Currently, we are only allowed to do construction lending at the level needed to activate the 4% low-income housing tax credit. So to generate that credit, a project must be financed by a specific amount of tax-exempt private activity bonds. So in other words, if you want to get the 4% LIHTC, you need to issue bonds, and that's the way they sort of regulate the amount of this credit that goes out. Prior to the 2025 reconciliation bill, 50% of the project's land and building costs were paid for. They were paid for using these bonds in the form of construction loans. The new federal law lowers this threshold from 50 to 25%. This allows us to stretch our limited private activity bond cap to support more projects. But if we want to lend on these projects as we currently do, while keeping the cost of construction loans as low as possible, it requires a statutory adjustment. The current statute allows us to provide construction loans in 4% LIHTC projects when our participation provides at least 60% of that construction loan. That 60% limit worked adequately under the old tax credit threshold. But with the new 25% threshold, participation in the financing would likely need to be split between Maine Housing and commercial banks, adding to the cost of capital. This bill simply changes the statute to allow Maine Housing to continue to make the full construction loan on 4% LIHTC transactions. That's what we do now. This will ensure the lowest cost of funds for these projects and the most efficient use of subsidy. The other part of this bill, which you see under Section C, reflects a need identified in the recent study pursuant to LD 1765 around improvements to mobile home communities. Our understanding, based on that report and on testimony by manufactured housing community owners, is that the cost of private financing for infrastructure improvements, those are things like adding more pads, extending utilities from other parts of the park, or developing new roads within the park, is very high when compared to a regular commercial construction loan. These loans are only collateralized by the land and the future our portfolio that we actually do construction lending on. We rely on commercial banks as critical partners in our work, and we do not expect that relationship to change because of this bill. Happy to try to take any questions you have, and I'll just say going into this that I don't do underwriting, so if for some reason you have technical questions that I can't get, I will definitely bring in someone for the work session.
Thank you, Mr. Jorgensen. Questions from the committee. Representative Mallon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Jorgensen, for being here. I assure you I will not be asking any underwriting questions myself. Would you say that passage of this measure would enable more competition into the marketplace in terms of the ability for projects to get financing and potentially result in putting downward pressure on the market when it comes to those loans?
I don't know about that. I think what this does, the way I would look at this is this really just allows us to keep doing what we're currently doing. This is nothing more. Basically, we still have to underwrite a gap, but the changes in the federal LIHTC program mean that the gap is a different, the gap's still there, but we'll fill it with different things. So it's, I don't think of it as changing, at least that wouldn't change the competition. I do think on the part of the bill that has to do with mobile home parks, I think that will make it easier just because our understanding, and I know there's folks here, the DeFosses are here among others probably, that I know it's hard for them to secure financing for that kind of purpose at this point. And that's what we're trying to respond to.
Representative Collmore.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hi, Mr. Jorgensen. Thank you for being here. 2 questions for you. One, this section C, is this part of what the president's reconciliation bill was, or this is something that would be unique to Maine?
Section C, hold on a minute.
Yeah, with the manufactured housing
Oh.
loan part.
Yeah, the way these two sections fit together is they both deal with construction lending, which is a small part of our work. So section C is really a Maine-based thing affecting our statute, whereas section B, or the other section that I was talking about, the 60% thing, that relates to conforming our statute with the federal reconciliation bill.
Okay, and then the other question I have is why would we only limit this to manufactured communities and not anybody who might be seeking a construction loan for a first-time home?
Well, I can't specify that. I know this is responding to a particular need that in those particular types of communities, this is a hard kind of lending to do. We're not trying to wildly expand our authority to do that kind of lending. We don't do that kind of lending on other projects, but this is something that is very hard for these communities, particularly given the nature of the manufactured housing community. The fact that you're building pads and you're building infrastructure that's on the ground or under the ground, it's sometimes hard to get it. I think the collateral, my understanding is there's collateral issues that make it expensive to do that. So this is solving a particular problem. I think that's just the other question is probably beyond the point or beyond the scope of this particular bill.
Other questions from the committee? I have a couple actually. So I'm curious as to what is the typical difference between what a construction loan rate would be from a commercial bank versus what Maine Housing would charge?
I don't know what the commercial bank rates currently are, but our current construction loans are available at 4.5% as of today. So it's a lot less than most commercial loans.
And what is the Maine Housing's portfolio of construction loans? What is the size of that?
I don't know that. I could find that out. But I could tell you that, like I say, this is the only part of our work that we actually do construction lending on. There are other projects that, like 9% projects, for example, we don't lend on those for the construction part. Those don't need private activity bonds to make the tax credit happen, and so we don't lend on those. This is really only about the 4% program, and I can find out what that portfolio is.
Thank you. Representative Lookner.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Just to introduce myself, I'm Grayson Lookner, House District 113. It's part of Portland. Just to make sure I'm reading this right. So this Maine Housing already had the authority to make construction loans for state bodies or other public instrumentalities and nonprofits, but not for construction loans, but not to privately owned or cooperative manufactured housing. And that's what this seeks to rectify.
Hold on a minute, like I can look at our statute. I mean, we really, we make construction loans to, we really only make construction loans to, we can do it to private organizations, but up till now, certain parts of our construction lending are restricted. We can't, we just only do this kind of lending on 4% because we have to issue bonds in order to make those particular projects happen.
And I guess I'm just curious about the history of this. Why was Maine Housing prohibited from doing this previously, or when the statute was written?
Yeah, well, since the start of the agency, my understanding is that Maine Housing was prohibited from doing construction lending in general. That's when they established us. That's what they did. When the federal LIHTC program was established, this changed that rule narrowly because it was necessary for us to issue tax-exempt bonds in order to trigger the 4% tax credit. So that's why we currently only do construction lending on those kinds of projects. We do permanent lending, once the construction loan period is over, then it gets converted into a permanent mortgage like you would have on a house or something, and it's a longer term thing that will take care of that, buys out the construction loan, and then it's permanent financing from there out. And we do that on all of our projects.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none. Thanks very much for your testimony, for being here.
Thank you very much.
Next to testify, we have Riley Worth.
Greetings, Senator Curry, Representative Gear, and members of the Committee on Housing and Economic Development. My name is Riley Worth with AARP Maine, the nation's largest nonprofit, nonpartisan organization dedicated to empowering Americans 50 and older. On behalf of our nearly 200,000 members and the several dozen in the room, thank you for the opportunity to share testimony in support of LD 2057. A 2024 survey we conducted found a majority of Maine residents 45 plus, that's 88%, want to stay in their homes as they get older. Mainers want to stay there, but 7 in 10 45 plus are concerned about getting kicked out of their home due to rising costs. When considering the future needs, 8 out of 10, 82%, of those 45 plus would also prefer to receive care in a home that they own and currently live in. Now, manufactured housing is often of critical importance to older Mainers, offering the right size and, most importantly, the right price point that many seniors can afford in the midst of our ongoing housing crisis. However, like the rest of our housing stock, mobile home parks across the state are themselves struggling under aging infrastructure. Many older Mainers across the state live in communities with a burst water pipe, a failing septic system, or unsafe electrical connections that could place the entire community in jeopardy, leaving them faced with the uncertainty of potential displacement. This bill directly addresses the aging infrastructure in our mobile home parks by enabling construction loans to private and cooperative-owned communities. Enabling loans for these will allow their owners to finish necessary repairs, undertake proactive maintenance, and prevent large infrastructure failures that may prompt the park's closure or sale to out-of-state investment firms that we've seen in previous years. This bill will not only reduce barriers for preserving existing homes, but also lower the barrier for creating new ones. We particularly support the provision that removes the requirement of third-party escrow agents on projects that are financed by certain tax credits by allowing the Housing Authority to make loans without a third party. These current regulations place an additional burden on the construction of new homes, and every new dollar spent on duplicative administrative burden is a dollar not spent on constructing new housing to meet the demand we currently see across the state from our members and older Mainers at large. This bill is a targeted technical fix for a broader area with deep human impact. Living and aging at home is only possible if we make it easier for our state and partners to build more affordable and accessible units, and this includes mobile homes. Additionally, this legislation will make it easier for community operators to improve living conditions and extend the serviceable life of many homes that older Mainers occupy. ARP Maine would note that we encourage lawmakers and the Housing Authority to utilize all available resources to offer lower or zero interest rate loans as part of this program. The current high interest rate environment, as mentioned by previous speakers, will be an inhibiting factor for potential loan recipients, and lower or near zero interest rate loans would promote further housing growth for all levels of manufactured housing. AARP Maine urges the committee to vote ought to pass, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Worth. Are there questions from the committee? Representative Collmore.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you very much for being here today. Could you point to me where in the law it's taking away the third-party requirement?
I don't have it printed in front of me. It was about section B halfway down if I'm memorizing it. Keyword escrow, I believe.
I'm looking at the same time. Yeah, it would be helpful because what we've heard is that there are basically you don't have to bring in the third party additional lender. We're not seeing the word escrow as we're looking at the bill. So
Okay.
maybe that's something we can clarify.
Yeah.
Other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thanks very much for your
Yeah,
testimony.
thank you. 1B is the answer.
Yeah, if we could, I'm just want to just put it out there for our analyst and for Maine Housing to make sure we're clear on the interaction and what was in the previous law existed and what is potentially different and what's proposed here. Thank you. And next to testify, we have Teresa DeFossis.
Good afternoon. My name is Teresa DeFossis. I'm the president of State Manufactured Homes in Scarborough. We're a family business that was started 84 years ago by my family. At the present time, there are 3 generations working at our business. We own 2 manufactured housing communities in Scarborough with a total of almost 700 sites. We are pleased for a change to support LD 2057, but suggest you know why I'm here usually, but suggest the following. In number 1C, it's possible to misinterpret the first sentence. The Maine State Housing Authority may make construction loans to privately owned or cooperative owned manufactured housing communities for the rehabilitation or development of additional home sites. I assume this includes entirely new manufactured housing communities, not just additional sites in existing communities. Can this be made clearer to avoid any future misunderstandings? And that's my biggest concern. And I'll be glad to answer any questions on financing, interest rates, whatever you need.
Thanks for being here, Ms. DeFossis, and always for bringing your perspectives to the committee. We appreciate it. Representative Lickner.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks for joining us today. So what would, a typical construction loan interest rate be? I don't know, like.
The last one
Up to
we
date.
had for 32 sites in an existing community was at Prime. And it's a variable rate,
Okay.
varies every year.
So when we heard earlier that like a construction loan of like 4.5%,
Mhm.
that'd be like a
That would be wonderful.
pretty good deal.
Yeah, great deal.
Yeah.
And even on Prime Plus loan, we have to sign personally. I guarantee all the loans myself, in addition to the community itself as collateral.
And you think you'd be able to build more housing with a 4.5% construction?
We're
loan?
looking now at building a new community.
Oh.
And we're in the process of getting approvals. We're 5 years into it now, and we haven't got to the planning board yet. But
Okay.
that would be a big help for us.
Would help.
Other questions for Ms. DeFossis? Seeing none, thanks very much for your
Thank
testimony.
you.
And next we have Greg Payne.
Good afternoon, Senator Curry, Representative Gear, and esteemed members of the Joint Standing Committee on Housing and Economic Development. My name is Greg Payne, and I serve as the Senior Advisor on Housing Policy in the Governor's Office of Policy Innovation in the Future. It's great to see you all again. we're here to offer support for LD 2057. We think it makes a whole lot of sense. Obviously, there are a couple different provisions here, one of which would, as Mr. Jorgensen was describing, sort of keep up with something that changed at the federal level in terms of their 4% credit lending. And the other would, as Mr. Jorgensen mentioned, align with a discussion I think we're going to have in this room on Thursday around the LD 1765 recommendation, specifically giving opportunity for owners of mobile home parks to expand and do infill and create new parks. I do just want to, just perhaps listening to the conversation, just spell this out a little more clearly. Every state in the country established housing finance agencies, and they did that in order to create, to have new tools that they wouldn't have otherwise, financing tools predominantly. One of those tools is the ability to offer lending at a lower rate. Maine is doing this different from any other state I know, in that, just so you know the kind of way the statute works, quite some time ago, the legislature said, well, we're going to not use that tool. And we are just going to not let Maine Housing do any construction lending whatsoever unless we specify what kind of construction lending we are okay with them doing. And so what you have is an existing statute that just has a couple carve-outs. And so, you know, I guess what we're doing here is talking about kind of keeping the current carve-out to a degree and adding a carve-out for mobile home parks. I just want to be clear about that in the sense that we do this differently. We are leaving dollars on the table. I do just want folks to understand. I just didn't know if that was kind of coming through. I mean, when Mr. Jorgensen says Maine Housing only does construction lending on 4% projects, that's literally just because that's all they're allowed to provide. If they were allowed to provide financing on other projects, I suspect they would do so. I just want to make that clear. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Payne. Questions, Representative Mallon?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is similar to what Representative Lookner asked Mr. Jorgensen earlier. Do you have any idea what the legislature's thinking was when it restricted Maine Housing's ability to engage in this type of activity? Seems like it's somewhat anti-competitive.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, my understanding of why that was there, obviously I wasn't there when it was passed, but is simply that banks didn't want to have to compete. You know, banks could offer these construction loans at 7.5%, while Maine Housing would be able to offer them at 4.5%. I think obviously it was a different time. We didn't have the same affordable housing crisis we have now. But yeah, I think the banks wanted that protection.
Representative Collmore.
So my question would be, why only manufactured housing? Why wouldn't we just remove the restrictions and let them be part of the competitive market so that people, no matter where they're moving to, let's say I want to build a house for my parents because I can't afford to put them in an assisted living place, but I can afford to build a house, but I need a construction loan. Why shouldn't I be able to do that? Or the person living down the road from me be able to do that? So that my question would be, why only do a carve out and not just let it happen?
I mean, it's a fair question. I will say, I am here offering the administration's perspective on this very kind of small loosening of this overall restriction. It may be that the governor's office would agree that that makes sense. Maybe they wouldn't. We just haven't had that conversation. So I can't represent an administration position. I totally understand your point, though. Yeah.
Other questions? Representative Lookner.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Payne. Both of my colleagues on the committee asked similar questions to what I was thinking, so I think we're going in the same direction. But I was also just wondering, if this were enacted and Maine Housing were able to issue these lower interest loans, do you think banks who are already in the construction loan business would start would have to start lowering their interest rates a little bit in order to, would that be another benefit potentially to this legislation?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think if, again, I think with the specific bill offered, I don't think, because it's such a small loosening of the restriction, I don't think it does much in that regard. I think it just sort of keeps the status quo. I think when you're talking about going beyond, the proposal that's in 2057, well, then yes. I mean, I think what would happen is you'd have, I think what you'd happen is Maine housing would be one option, commercial banks would be another option. Developers could choose which ones they wanted to go with. And my guess is that the banks would feel some pressure to reduce their rates because of the competition.
Other questions? Just following on from that point, I'm wondering if for the work session, we could see some information about how other comparable states work the construction lending process through their housing finance bank for their state. Because I'm a little concerned that we're kind of missing the boat on something that I hear from communities and developers all the time, that is a gap in making projects happen when they can't get a construction loan to kind of get to the point where they have a property that can be occupied. So is that something that the administration can provide? I'm looking at our analyst as well, just to note this for the work session. If we could have some contextual information, I think that would help the committee to consider the full environment here.
Totally. And, I think the housing finance agencies have pretty close relationships with each other. They have the ability to share this information quite easily with each other. But yes, I mean, we're going to be having conversations like on Thursday about tweaks to the elevator provisions that might save $10,000 for a whole project. What you're talking about here is in the hundreds of thousands of dollars that would affect lots of projects.
Thank you. Yeah, that would be super helpful, and I would appreciate that for the work session. Any other questions? Seeing none, thanks very much.
Thank you.
So that's all I have on the sign-up sheet for folks in the room who would like to testify in favor of the bill. Anybody else who would like to testify in favor? Anybody opposed? Anybody neither opposed? Okay. Please come on up and introduce yourself and provide any testimony. Thank you.
Greetings, Senator Curry, Representative Gear, members of the committee. My name is Josh Stearman. I'm here with the Maine Bankers Association. I'm testifying in opposition to particular language in Section 1B, but I do want to make it clear that we support the general intent of the sponsor. We take no position on the manufactured housing elements of the bill, and we truly value the collaborative relationship we have with all these other parties. So the Maine Bankers Association is a trade group representing 34 banks across the state of Maine. Several of our banks routinely do this kind of work, financing affordable housing projects. Section 1B of the draft bill would permit Maine State Housing to make the whole construction loan for particular types of affordable housing. That would expand the universe of certain deal types where they are able to take the entire financing of the project. The intent of the bill in Congress was to encourage more projects by lowering the requirement and therefore allowing more private capital to flourish. So this would be working in cross purposes to that, and we believe could have a detrimental effect on access to financing. Bankers across the state of Maine have a long history of working collaboratively, Maine State Housing and government entities, to build housing at affordable costs, and we share a lot of the same goals. But that collaboration, part of why it's been so successful, has been because the relationship is complementary. Banks and the housing agency offering different elements. We are concerned that Section 1B threatens to overstep that line and cause a state agency to effectively come into competition with banks operating in the state. And we find that problematic. Again, I want to underscore that we've been collaborative and value our partnerships, but we are concerned about this one particular provision and what it would do to financing opportunities. Happy to take questions.
Thanks very much. Representative Collmore.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you very much for coming before us. I'm just curious, what you would fix in that section to make it so that it wouldn't have a conflict?
Delete it.
Like which part? Are you talking about deleting the whole thing from there and just fixing it from 60% to 25%? I'm trying to figure out because we can't leave 60% in there if we're fixing it and adjusting it to match.
I think we'd be open to discussing any possible solutions, and I didn't come here with an amendment to present to you. Happy to look at compromise ideas if you have any, but the prior standard and happy to look at solutions. Yeah, thank you.
Representative Mallon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If section 1B as currently drafted were to become law, how would that differ from how state housing authorities are treated in the other New England states? And I might have a follow-up depending on
Sure.
your.
Well, it's speculative, so we don't know, but one of the concerns is that banks would be crowded out of this space, and the share of this business would go towards Main State Housing. So banks are ready and willing to participate in affordable housing projects and have a long track record of doing so very capably. And we think that the finite amount of dollars Main State Housing available ideally could be spread out among a larger number of projects to bring more volume online instead of being concentrated in particular deals, which I think is going to be a result of this bill.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for the answer. And I certainly appreciate the lending that the banks do, but have the banks been crowded out of the market in the other New England states where the state housing authorities have this ability?
Not an expert on what's happened in other states, but there are other states where banks effectively do not participate in some of these markets because government agencies have essentially taken the whole pie.
Representative Lookner.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Stearman, for joining us today. Similar line to what Representative Mallon's asking. And also in your testimony, you said you're really, concerned that Main Housing would be essentially competing with the banks here. So I guess my question is, if Main Housing's offering a 4.5% loan on construction costs for these, very narrow range of projects that we're looking at here, what would the downside be of a regular old bank offering, a similar construction? What would the downside be for a bank to offer a 4.5% construction loan?
I don't have a sense of what current terms are, and I think different banks would be offering different terms. So I'm not sure I'm able to answer that question. That would be valuable. Yeah.
Representative Golick.
I have a question. I'm going to try to word it so that it's understandable the best that I can. So you said specifically happy to participate in affordable housing projects. We're talking about manufactured housing. And it's, to my knowledge, banks historically financing even a manufactured home is very different than what they do financing a stick-built affordable housing. So could you just give some clarity around what the equivalent is here? Because this bill is specifically designed for that.
My understanding of 1B is it is not only for manufactured housing. This would apply to other types of buildings as well. So that's the nature of our concern. Yes, it's titled as a bill about manufactured housing, but our reading is that the impact would be broader than just manufactured housing.
Okay, thank you.
Of course.
Other questions? Actually, I have a question. In thinking about the work that this committee has been focused on for a while here, we're really looking at lowering the cost of capital as one of the key components of the cost of building affordable and attainable housing for folks. So, it's really hard to do this, right? It's really hard when you're looking at land costs and soft costs and labor materials that kind of, the market tells us what those things cost. So this is one of those areas where if we're looking at the cost of capital being lower, basically because Maine Housing has been established to offer that. And by bringing in private capital, that's the blended rate becomes higher to the extent that that's blocking projects from happening. That it's not an environment where we kind of have an open market and, this is happening. We have projects that are stalled in many instances because they can't get through the risky period with financing that works for them. So I guess I wanted to frame the challenge that way because I think there's, maybe this isn't the place. Maybe there are better uses of banks' capital in Maine rather than focusing on these projects. There's a bigger picture here that I want to make sure we tease out. And are there things that we're missing in this bill that could help to lower the overall cost of capital?
I appreciate the concerns, Madam Chair. I'm not sure that the government capital will always be lower cost. So I might push back a little bit on that example. And also, I'm not sure this is really impacting projects getting off the ground. I think this is more about once a project's complete, once it's moving, or not complete, but once a project's been approved and it's moving forward, where the financing goes. So I don't think this is really about incentivizing more units. I think it's about once it's baked, where that business is going to go.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Representative Lickner?
Yeah.
Representative Lickner.
I'd just be curious if you could bring to the work session, maybe some examples of what your current rates are for construction costs.
Sure.
And maybe an example of, some different projects that have been financed.
Happy to do that. And I would note that because these are generally going to be tax exempt projects, the rates you find there are going to be lower than on a traditional commercial loan, but I'm happy to dig into some examples. Thanks.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thanks very much for being here for your testimony. Is there anyone else in the room wishes to testify against this bill? Seeing none, I believe we have one person online to testify, Nick Beers, testifying in favor.
Hi there. Can everybody hear me?
We can hear you. Oh, there you are. Great.
Okay.
Please go ahead. The floor is yours.
Thanks. Senator Curry, Representative Geer, and the distinguished members of the Joint Standing Committee on Housing and Development. My name is Nick Beers, and together with my wife, Samantha, we own and operate 3 mobile home communities in the Mid-Coast totaling 74 units. We were participants in the recent GOPIF discussions around preservation of existing MHCs as affordable housing and understanding the barriers to developing more units. I am testifying to express my strong support for LD 2057 as it relates to Maine Housing expanding lending into the MHC construction space. I think some general background could be helpful. So it's currently uneconomical to develop additional MHCs in Maine, even at today's higher lot rents. This is clearly evidenced by the fact that very few of these projects are undertaken. There are numerous factors contributing to this. There's overly burdensome local zoning and engineering requirements, I think some of which stems from NIMBYism, to use the acronym, low density allowances, and a lack of lending that suitably fits with these affordable housing projects. The current legislative environment around MHCs in Maine, and I'll give you 2 examples, numerous proposed rent control measures, and the recently passed $10,000 per unit fee upon transaction should someone like myself choose to sell to a bigger investor. These things are going to further widen the feasibility and incentive gaps for people like me to develop new units in the state. I think LD 2057 can help to bridge this gap by allowing Maine Housing to provide construction lending to MHCs similar to other affordable housing programs. So I just wanted to share kind of a case study of one community we have that has land for expansion and what that looks like for us. So one of our communities has enough land for roughly 20 additional units. That's at today's density. I know there's also discussions about increased density in the future. So for 20 units at today's density, there's no cost for land in this example. We already own it. In my written testimony, I've outlined a relatively comprehensive scope of work that you guys could see, but it's pretty self-explanatory. It's extending all of the utilities, new roads, new power, etc. One point to highlight, due to the rigorous engineering and environmental requirements of the town, it's going to cost us 50 to 75,000 in engineering before we can even apply for town approval. I'm sure that Teresa's project dwarfs that, honestly, but for us, I have to be 75,000 out of pocket before I can even go for an application. In total, the site work alone for this project will be about 50 to 70,000 per pad, or 1 to 1.4 million for 20 units. And that's earthwork only, not getting the homes in there. There's a substantial risk that the project runs over budget, aka we hit ledge and need to blast or something like that. So after the site work is complete, we need to purchase and install 20 homes to fill the sites, which will cost an additional $2 to $4 million, depending on the size and finishes of the homes. The cost of the homes is eventually recovered when they are sold, but we have to make loan payments until that time on the full outstanding debt. So large corporate park owners can probably do projects like this with funds they have available. I'm thinking people like Sun Communities and stuff like that. They can just do this out of pocket. But the numerous smaller operators like ourselves need to take out construction loans. It will take an undetermined amount of time to sell the new homes, and meanwhile, we are attempting to service the debt on a total of $3 to $5 million with zero revenue at the point of completion of the project. The risk of defaulting on the loan before all of the homes are sold is simply too high, and it becomes impossible for us to consider undertaking the project.
Mr. Beers, if you could wrap up, your time has expired.
Absolutely. LD 2057 would help facilitate the construction of new MHC sites in Maine by allowing Maine Housing to provide construction financing for these projects. They could substantially reduce the risk associated with building a community by allowing deferment of payments until the community is operational and generating income. Also, advantageous term loans at the end of the project could result in lower allotments. That's all I've got. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there questions for Mr. Beers? Seeing none, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else online? So we have no one else to testify online. And so with that, I will close the public hearing on LD 2057.
We're going to take a short break while we shift into work session mode, and I'm going to ask there's been a request for opportunity to caucus, so you'll be on your own.
You can have a good discussion with yourself.
I think Amanda
Marty.
might be in the retiring, so if caucus members can grab their paperwork. Welcome back, everybody. We are going to go in order. We're going to start with LD 1995, and I'll ask. Yeah,
1921 is the first one.
not on my calendar.
On the white paper, it's a different.
Oh, wow.
We'll start. Is there a reason to start with one versus another? Are you ready for 1995?
I am.
Okay, we'll go off the white paper then.
Okay. So 1995 is an act to require the Maine Office of Community Affairs to establish a technical assistance material hub, and this is Senator Curry's bill. My bill analysis is being handed out as we speak. So this directs MOCA to establish and maintain a technical assistance materials hub that provides information to the public to guide decision makers planning for and implementing projects. The bill is very broad with the type of materials that can be on the hub, but it does highlight a few, including minimum planning, client resilience, housing, and a development. But again, it does not limit the materials that MOCA can put on this hub, other than it's intended to guide decision makers planning for and implementing projects. And the office is required to coordinate with appropriate entities to create the hub, and it requires MOCA to regularly update the hub. And you had some testimony in favor and some written testimony, no opponents for neither for nor against as far as testifying. I did not find any substantive or policy issues in this. There were two technical issues. One is this an online only hub? And if it is, would it be helpful to put the word online in there? I don't know the answer to that. And the other is that there's a portion on materials on planning, and that is a vague term. Not sure if it says, this is in line 11. Including but not limited to planning. That's a broad term. I think it's not a flaw, it's not a substantive flaw in the bill. It's just something I noted. So those are the only two things I could find in the bill that you might want to clarify, but other than that, that's my bill analysis.
Thank you. Representative Callamore.
Thank you. And I'm not sure if this is a question for Lynn or if this is more of a general question. How do we ensure that if this were to pass as currently written, that it is not duplicative of the work that the land bank is already doing with their technical support and papers and all of that?
Great. Why don't we ask Director Samantha Horn that question? Welcome, Director.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good
Did you hear the question?
Good afternoon. Yes, I did. Thank you.
I didn't even catch that.
It's been a day.
Yeah.
Pardon?
That's a true story.
Yes. So I think that we need to be proactive about making sure that we're not duplicating efforts with any of these entities. So there are a number of projects underway to try to present to the public and to communities information about risk assessment and resilience work and redevelopment work. And what we want to make sure is that this hub is not doing the same kind of collation and distribution of those materials. What we're going to do is like point to those to help people find them better. So this will be far less detailed and in-depth than, say, a coastal inundation model or a redevelopment data package or something. It will say, there's a redevelopment data package available from the land bank. Here's the contact information. Here's the link to the information. And so it's a central place to go so that you can find all of those really important efforts, not to duplicate the good work that's happening in each of those efforts.
Yeah, please follow up.
Thank you. And in addition to that, and again, I don't know if this is for you or for Lynn, but on this bill analysis, we see that there is no fiscal impact provided at this date. What is the fiscal impact of some, because we have to consider that when we're making this choice.
I'm still in discussions with the governor's office about funding options for this. If it goes to a fiscal note with attached to the bill, then the annual expenses would be somewhere around $75,000 to do maintenance of it, from both curation of the materials and also the like hosting fees of whatever platform we end up on. And then we have some options for either putting money or raising money through philanthropic means for the build. So that part is less certain, but the annual amount would be about 75,000.
Could you address, obviously I'm the sponsor, but this is a department bill. Can you address the why you feel that this should be a statute and not something you just do on your own?
Sure. One of the things that I've been talking with folks about in communities and in our partner organizations and nonprofits and academic institutions is that we're really in a time when there's less stability for government programs in particular. I mean, that's true broadly, but we are seeing a lot of rapid changes in government programs when there are changes in administration and I think that for me to ask a foundation or a regional council or whomever to put the time and effort into helping us stand this up and potentially donate money as well, I'd like to give this the best chance possible to have some staying power. And so I think having it as part of our statutory mission shows that the legislature felt it was important that we provide this service and that it wasn't sort of a one person's idea that got built in a state agency somewhere, that it has more gravitas than that and is something that's broadly valued.
Thank you. Are there other questions? Chair Gear.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On a related topic, my one concern with these kinds of repository ideas is that over time, and sometimes it doesn't take very long, they sort of become this like laundry list of links and you're sort of like, okay, I got a long laundry list of links. I'm just curious, we've talked a lot about the idea of MOCA being a one-stop shop / a consultative body that helps municipalities. And how do we avoid that in this instance where it's a resource that is grouped around the needs and opportunities that municipalities and regions have, as opposed to here is a list of grants that do X, or here is the value is really in the transformation that this effect that it can have on some of these challenges that we face that are cross-sectoral and in many cases. So I guess I would just ask you to respond to that
Sure.
idea.
So I think about this like, so when my kids were little, they weren't very good at cleaning their rooms. And so I would have them take a cardboard tube, like from a paper towel roll or something. And I would say, all right, look through the roll and through the tube, and then just pick up the one thing you can see and some of the projects that are being built now are like that. So there's the resilience workbook that currently exists in paper is being put online. And that's a very specific topic, looking through the toilet paper tube and saying, all right, here's the thing that we're going to focus on here is this resilience workbook. There are other things like that for housing. There are other things like that, for redevelopment. What we'd like to do is have a place where all of all the resources can be found. And then if there are very specific applications that are needed, those can be built attached to or connected to this hub. And so we do want to make it so that you aren't just browsing through a list of links like the 1990s version of a list of resources. We do want to have something that's dynamic where you have keywords and you can get like nested kinds of sorts. So you can say, I'm this kind of entity. I mean, you've seen the funding finder. There's some concepts like that. But we're not trying to build something that really dissects it all and creates context for all of it, because to do that for every topic would be completely overwhelming. But what we have now is a situation where I was, you know, Hancock County Planning Commission has this really wonderful packet for how you can do visioning and comp planning. They are the ones that have it. And if you're in another region, you don't know it's there. If you're, you know, if you're not served by their region, you don't know it's there. We can at least gather things and make it searchable in a way that you can narrow down what you want based on the type of entity you are, what kind of problem you're having, and then see various types of resources. I don't see this as solving the interpretation problem of like diving deep into any one issue and really dissecting it, because there are efforts underway for several of those things right now. But the Resilience Hub and the Climate Risk Hub and if we have a housing hub someday, and the Ptolemy data collection for redevelopment land bank and all these things, there's not a point where someone can go and say, where are these things? What are these things that I can identify as being in the topic area that I'm looking for? And so it's that like higher level, helping people find things in the first place that we're aiming for with this project, trying to keep it relatively simple, not make it particularly complex. And that's a first step. And then people can build more detailed tools off of it for particular things. I feel like I'm seeing some faces that maybe I've confused folks. But so anyway, I'll stop there and see if I should talk more about any of those elements. Did I answer your question?
It's one of those times when it's hard to visualize when you haven't seen it yet. So I'm trying to get my arms around that. And I totally get the need that you're expressing, where we've got great resources and we need to make those available to more people dealing with these challenges around the state.
Yeah.
Completely agree with that. When I think about AI and I think about how the search capabilities are improving across the web, and everything we search for, you get all kinds of interesting things already. Like, how is this different than that? Like, that's what I'm struggling with a little bit. I think it's an admirable activity. It's important to do. I do agree that there are just lots of places where there are really great resources. It's just, is that the best way to spend $75,000? I'm wondering. Right. So that's the challenge.
So when we asked so as you probably know, through the NOAA CRRC grant, we have these regional coordinators in the various regional councils, where there's a person there who's paid to help communities, particularly with the Community Resilience Partnership Program, to fill out grants and understand what resources they can find. But they do refer those communities out to other kinds of resources and technical assistance as well. And we talked to them about, is this kind of concept useful to them? And one of the things they said was that frequently they get calls from communities saying, is there a blah-de-blah, or we have an issue about this topic? And then the coordinators start calling around and they start trying to find out, where do these things exist? And so the feedback we got from the coordinators was that it would save an hour or two per call for many of these inquiries if it was right at their fingertips to be able to find these things. And I think when you repeat that across many service providers, across regional councils, across folks who are in a town trying to quickly figure out, where are these resources? Where can I go to find something? It's that avoiding that search process for the first cut at where these things are, that is a real time saver for folks. It also helps people understand if they are going to be duplicating an effort. So if someone's going to go write a model ordinance, they can look to see if a model ordinance already exists. And a lot of times you're not going to find that kind of thing on a Google search. Because a lot of times it's like in somebody's computer files because they created it 3 years ago, but they don't have a site to put it on or those sorts of things. So this is really about efficiency of finding materials and making them visible to the whole community, so that whole community in Maine, so that it's we're not redoing things that somebody else already has. And so we're shortening search times. It's not meant to dive deep into any one topic.
And if I could just add one thing to that, and I would just say, I mean, I hear what you're saying, which is it's sort of like one step before we get to that. What else can you do with this to really make these things easily accessible for people so that they can see them? I guess I would just plant the seed to say, you know, still I go around the state and I go around my own community and I talk to people about housing stuff and all this great stuff. And they're like, oh, they're doing that in Newcastle. Oh. And you know, when people start to see things, their barriers come down in there.
Yeah.
They're concerned. Oh, well, that's fine. That would be fine here, you know? So it's sort of like, how do we do that more? And how do we do that in targeted ways that are better able to make people aware more broadly, not just the practitioners, you know, in all the communities that are working, but, you know, just generally, so people can see that here are some ways that communities around the state are addressing their housing needs, that sort of thing. So
Yeah.
it's sort of starting from a slightly different point, but I get the point about where you are. So thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Does the committee have further discussion or questions of the analyst? Representative Chair Gear.
Thank you. I would like to move on to pass. Is it as amended? Do we have an amendment here? No, on to pass on LD 1995.
Moved and seconded. Further discussion? Representative Callamore.
Thank you. I think it would have to be as amended since there's a fiscal note potentially coming. But because we have a potential fiscal note coming and it's unclear where the money is coming from and how we're going to afford $75,000 per year, I will not be supporting the motion on the table and will be voting against it. Thank you.
Is the committee ready for a vote?
If I may, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
So at this point, it would be an ought to pass, straight ought to pass, with people voting, having the understanding that if a fiscal note does appear, then it would become, at that point, ought to pass as amended. Because at this point, there isn't a fiscal note, so there's nothing to.
So we don't have
amend
to change it.
Right.
Okay.
So
So it's
that's
ought to
usually-
pass, and then does it automatically go ought to pass as amended if there's a fiscal note?
That's completely the committee's choice.
Okay.
You can decide that now and say, yes, make it automatically ought to pass as amended, or you can say, Lynn, bring it back.
Okay. With that, the motion is ought to pass. It's been moved and seconded. Is the committee ready for the vote? I'll ask our clerk to call the roll. And for those who are absent, we have 2 business days, so that's going to be, today's
Noon.
Tuesday, so Thursday.
Noon on Thursday.
Noon on Thursday will be the deadline.
And sorry, who seconded that?
Thank you. Representative Julia.
Thank you. Okay, those voting for the motion ought to pass. Representative Mingo.
Yes.
Yes from Representative Mingo. Representative Mallon.
Yes.
Yes for Representative Mallon. Representative Golick.
Yes.
Yes for Representative Golick. Representative Youssef.
Yes.
Yes for Representative Youssef. Bailey and Bennett absent. Senator Curry.
Yes.
Yes from Senator Curry. Representative Gear.
Yes.
Yes for Representative Gear. Representative Colmore.
No.
That's a no for Representative Colmore. Walker is absent, and Representative Lookner.
Yes.
Yes for Representative Lookner and Representative Julia.
Yes.
Yes for Representative Julia. That is 8 in favor and 1 opposed.
And the minority report,
Ought not to pass.
Not to pass.
having all members present having voted, we will close the work session for LD 1995. Thank you. And we'll now open up the work session for LD 1921. And I understand there is a sponsors amendment. Has that been passed out already?
Yes, Mr. Chair. It was already passed out because I thought you were starting with this one.
So
Um,
the yellow sheet in front of us?
Yeah. I will say that I do have some comments on it, but I thought perhaps the sponsor sitting in the chair seat might want to walk the committee through it first.
Sure. So this amendment takes the results of our previous work sessions on this bill and with feedback, from the judicial branch that this was not something that under the structure of Maine's government, this would really be possible. Wanted to move this to a resolve to study the pathways for creating this resolution board of some kind. So this would establish a legislative group that would be made up of 2 members of the Senate, 2 members from the House, and then also have representation from Maine State Housing, and then other members as noted here. So members from the statewide municipal organization, member from the Regional Business Association, and an organization that advocates for real estate development. And then also 4 public members, 1 who represents affordable housing and affordable housing advocacy, 1 who represents regional planning and statewide planning for smart growth, 1 who represents the real estate industry, and 1 who represents an organization that advocates for low income and middle income renters. So those 2 groups, 1 would be appointed by the President of the Senate, the other by the Speaker of the House. And then the goal of this would be to have a report on the next page that would review the challenge around the housing shortage that we face, look at the makeup and structure of other housing resolution boards across the country, review the reports commissioned by the legislature regarding the housing shortage, and then also determine what steps would need to be taken in order to set up something similar to in the state. And then that would come back to this committee, and then over time would then in the 133rd be something that we would be able to evaluate and report out a bill on rather. So
Am I accurate? This would go on the, should this pass in the chambers, this would go on the special study table? Okay.
yes, that's my
Yes.
understanding, that would go to the study table.
Representative Callamore.
Thank you. 2 questions. 1, do we know if the governor supports having a member of her office on this? And 2, actually 3 questions, sorry. 2, do we have a bill analysis for this amendment to know any potential issues? And 3, what is the fiscal note?
I can answer 2 of 3 of the two of those. Not the first one about the governor's office. I have a bill analysis in that I had an opportunity to read this and can speak to it to you. I have not had an opportunity to provide it in writing, but I have all the elements. And the cost, because it's a legislative study, it goes on the legislative study table. And this one has 6 meetings. Others have 4. It's something that I could find for you, but that comes out of the budget for the legislature.
Further discussion?
And then just to respond to the other question about the governor's office, I don't know that they exactly have approved this, but there have been discussions happening. So I can get back and respond on that, but.
Further discussion? Is the committee ready for a vote?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
can I just provide the analysis?
Oh,
that
please
I-
do. Yes,
thank you,
absolutely.
Thank you. I'm just going to go through this in order of the sections. So that some might be technical comments and some might be policy, but I'll let you know. The first one is, this is an emergency bill. And I believe that there should be a little bit more explanation of why it's an emergency. Some thoughts that came to my mind were that there is a shortage of housing, and solving the housing shortage is important, that disputes between developers and municipalities often delay the process. And so that could be a justification for the emergency because you need to justify it. And the other one that's very common when it comes to commissions is that if you wait until 90 days after the legislature adjourned, and granted, this is more of a problem in the first regular than the second, that cuts into the amount of time you have to do the work. So if it's an emergency, 30 days till the appointments, and then the commission can begin working. That's on that section. On the section 2 that has the membership, a technical issue is as far as the governor's member, it would be better to say named by the governor as opposed to appointed by the governor, because an appointment is an actual official act of the governor, so they'd have to be some communication back and forth. So named by the governor would be a better way to phrase that. Section 3 is common. They're common for commissions. Section 4, the language is very common for commission. There is a missing section, which is the requirement that there actually be a report back, and a date for the report back is set in the rule, and that the authority of the legislature, the housing committee for the 133rd, you would want to add in a different section. And then as far as the duties, this is where it gets to a policy question. Duties 2, 4, 5, 6, 5 all have to do with, very clearly, with the statewide housing resolution board. Duty number 1 and duty number 3 are much broader. 1 is review data on housing shortages and proposals to remove barriers. There are, as you know, a variety of different barriers, a variety of different solutions. So very broad task for this commission, as is number 3, which is reviewing reports. I'm more concerned with, well, both are very broad and may take time away from this commission, from their ability to focus on the state. If the main purpose is a creation and thought about a statewide housing resolution board, you may want to add into 1 and 3 that it's data on housing, housing resolution boards. And maybe in 3, reports, and it doesn't just have to be reports maybe from Maine, but reports on the work of similar housing resolution boards, something that narrows it a little bit more. Just so the group knows that they should stay focused, unless of course you want them to do a broader scope, and then 1 and 3 would be fine. And those are the only comments I have on this bill.
Thank you. Representative Cullimore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The other thing that I notice is missing from this too, unless you said it and I missed it, I'm sorry, I was trying to take notes. I don't see anybody identified as the chair to convene the group either.
Section 3 says the first name senator.
Oh, sorry, thank you.
That's fine.
Representative Gear, can you address the analyst's comments regarding section 5, 1, and 3? Her statement that it is very broad and possibly should be narrowed to housing, more relevant to housing resolution boards. Do you have any thoughts on that?
So I guess I would just be looking to our analyst, Ms. Westfall, if she has suggested language to focus that, because I get the point that we want to not have them go far afield. This is a pretty specific charge.
I would say if you focus on number 2, review the structure and makeup of similar housing resolution boards across the country. That could include reviewing data and reviewing reports. So it would tie, you're looking at what's going on in other states and including looking at, so you'd be looking at the laws perhaps, but you'd also be looking at data and reports. So I might put all 3 of those together. And actually, I wanted to comment on 6 and 7, which talk about land use cases. You may want to specify, because land use cases could be a neighbor dispute that has nothing to do with housing development. So if you're focused on housing developments, excuse me, court cases about housing development disputes, you may want to add a similar land use cases relating to disputes between municipalities and developers, or something more focused. Otherwise, you might have a lot. But as far as the original question, I would just move data and reports into a revised number 2 and get rid of 1 and 3.
So that I like that approach, and I also would say that if we just had made 6 and 7, assessing the number of land use cases related to housing development, rather than having determining the number. I mean, the idea being is just to look at housing development land use cases and identify the scope of that those types of cases.
Okay.
So I'm reading 6 and 7, and it looks to me like what we're trying to have them do is look at when there is appeal disagreement on the land use cases, and how long that process takes, and does that length itself kill projects? And then 7 is trying to look at like, well, how did we get to the right answer? Like when projects are denied, are they like there's a level of like that's the quality test of are we getting these right? That's how I interpret that. I don't know if there's a better way to say that.
And if I may, Mr.
Mhm.
Chair, there's an assumption under there that a denial of the development is actually a bad result. Which,
I'm actually not making that.
Okay.
Like I'm not trying to say that is like what I am wanting to do is some analysis of how long does the process take,
Mhm.
and how well do we get to the correct answer, and the correct answer being, based on what is before them in terms of municipal ordinances and state policy or state statute. And the assumption I do have is that projects die that would have passed,
mhm.
but because of the length, the capital walks away, or, it takes too long, and projects die because the process is too onerous. Now, that's an assumption I have. I could be wrong.
I completely understand what you're getting at. If I look at this as, is this a task that can be done in 6 meetings with staff and all of these members, members on the commission? That kind of question that you're asking, so something goes to court and it takes a year and a half and the project dies because of it. The thought I'm thinking of is, how does someone figure that out? Where is the data on, there were 12 cases on land use that involved municipalities and a housing developer that you can capture.
Yeah.
So there may be a way to fudge it a little bit so that it's not okay, you need to do this, commission, because you don't want the commission to be overwhelmed going down answering one of these questions. I don't have an idea on right now that I can say this is a great way to redraft it, but assessing the number of land use cases, length of time it takes, and any impact on the original development. That may be broad enough that when the commission gets together and they're told it would take, 5 months to do that, it might take a day. But let's say the commission can then decide that's not our priority. We'd rather focus on, points 1, 3, and 5.
Representative Golick?
So I have a question.
I had not thought that that wasn't clear, because when I think housing, I think both, but there would be a way to probably put something in here that said housing includes manufactured housing communities and mobile home parks.
Mhm. Mhm. So I'm going to propose moving forward in this way, and I want to check the pulse of the committee members. The language seems to need to be tightened up in section 5. I would love to see language in front of me that does everything that the analyst just recommended to add to the emergency preamble with the more housing the recognizing the housing shortage, recognizing the challenge when delay happens, and the delayed start, adding all three of those, adding the named rather than appointed governor, adding a section 7 or fitting in the report back of in December, and ability to report out a bill. And then what I would recommend is that you work with the bill sponsor or anyone else who wants to engage in this to tighten this language up. And we table to give you that time to do this. And then bring it back next week so that we can do that. Because it feels like we're going to wordsmith this. This could be an amazing commission that really helps us with a real challenge that's out there. We don't see an obvious solution right now, but I feel like I accept your position that this area needs to be tightened up. We've just addressed four of the 7 points of what they were being asked to do. Is the committee acceptable of tabling and giving them time? Yep. Representative Cullimore.
Thank you. Just so that I'm clear in remembering this, because this has the emergency preamble, even if it were to come out of committee positive, it needs 2/3 of both bodies, correct, in order to stay in emergency?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
And it would go to legislative table anyway, so it won't be finalized until the end of session, but it would then go into effect immediately after the end of session. But yes, it still needs 2/3.
Yeah, great. Is there a motion to table? Thank you, Representative Mallon. Is there a second? Second. All those in favor? Okay. Tabling, we just tabled LD 1921. And we'll close that work session and we'll open up the work session on LD 1806. I understand there is a sponsor's amendment. Is that correct?
That is correct. And the clerk will hand that out to you. If it's amenable to the committee, going to go through it a little bit slowly.
Have
Because
you had
it's
the opportunity to read it and do an analysis?
Oh, yes, I have worked with the sponsor on drafting this.
Great,
The
thank you.
sponsor has worked with the Secretary of State's office. So this draft has been reviewed and as far as I know, okayed by both the sponsor and the Secretary of State's office. It looks a little different than what was originally presented to you because of some of the conversations you had during that first work session. So either you could have this, perhaps you want to have the sponsor talk first, and then I could go through some of the details of this, because a lot of it is just repetition of the same sections into several titles, so it's not as bad as it looks.
Oh, I'll ask the bill sponsor, would you prefer the analyst to walk through it or would you like to?
We can do a little bit of both. I can do a little introduction and then have Lynn as the technical person walk through it. But I think essentially actually what we walked through last week in our initial work session was that kind of play-by-play that I described to you. I do just want to also offer that understandably, the bill that was presented to us last year looks a lot different than what we have in front of us today. So the communication that, like I acknowledged last week, the communication that you've been getting about this bill from your constituents is there should be clarification. So I want to make sure that I'm providing you with those resources so that you can get back to your constituents and let them know in actuality what this bill does. So I do just want to start by saying I have like drafted up some summaries for you so that, because I know you've been getting a lot of emails so that you can get back to those people. And I think I'll just start by just reiterating that what this bill does, just to, especially because there were people that were not present for that work session. So I'll just start with a quick summary. What this bill does is it all businesses have to register with the Bureau of Corporations every year. They do an annual report. So what this bill does is it changes that form just a little bit so that those businesses are reporting their NAICS codes, the North American Industrial Classification System, which is a code that basically describes what kind of industry are you in your business. So not only does this bill serve as a start for a rental registry, and it's definitely a new way of addressing a rental registry, it also gives us a landscape of the industry in Maine, and it brings us up to par with other states who do receive that information. And of course, if businesses report that that their business includes long-term residential units, then it will trigger them to fill out a form that provides demographic information that you'll see laid out as Lynn goes through our new amendment. And the whole point of this is to provide first responders with information on those rentals, especially when they're owned by larger companies. We don't always know who's the person to contact. So it really helps first responders, and it also aids our housing navigators in finding rental properties to help people navigate to. So I think that.
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you. Even before we walk through this, are there first responders telling you that they need this in order to do their jobs? And where are they? Because I have heard from 0% of them.
So in the history of rental registry bills that have been presented at the State House, that's always been a main concern. That's always been what we've heard historically. I did not bring any anecdotal evidence or data to you today, so I do apologize for that. But also, I can tell you as I give you the information to help talk to your constituents about this bill, that is something that I can find for you.
Great, thank you. I'd like to go through the walkthrough at this point. So if I could ask the analyst to walk us through what this amendment is seeking to do.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just want to start by saying that there are 5 types of businesses that have to file an annual report, and they are in 5 different parts of the statute. So the same language is repeated in a variety of places in this bill. The types of entities, and I did confirm that all these domestic and foreign are required under state law so foreign are required to register or get a certificate. There was that question last time, but the types of businesses are nonprofits, regular corporations, limited liability partnerships, limited partnerships, and limited liability companies. Those are the 5 types of entities that under current state law are required to file an annual report. What this bill does, if in the first page, it's dealing with those nonprofit, domestic, or foreign corporations. If you look at section 3, it says just what Representative Rana said. In their annual report, they have to identify the industry code under the National American Industry Classification System, which is a Census Bureau system. That appears in those 5 different sections throughout the bill. The second requirement, which is section 4, it says if you have identified your industry code as you're engaged in renting or leasing residential buildings or residential dwellings on a long-term basis, so that excludes short-term rentals, then you have to provide this additional information, which is subsections A through H, and they are the same for each business type. So name and email address of owner, name and email address of management company, if different, name and email address of parent or subsidiary entities, emergency contact information of the owner, if different, physical address, mailing address, if it's a multiple residential unit, the total number of units, the total number of occupied units, and then if it's not available for occupancy due to, this is number H, whether under construction or under renovation. So that additional information will be required, and the Secretary of State's office has to create a form. And this all goes into effect January 1 of 2028. So that's a main component of the bill, and those are the requirements on these 5 types of entities. There's also a kind of enforcement provision, but I'll stop before I get to that one.
Okay, so I want to thank you, Representative Lookner.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So my reading of this, a foreign, domestic or foreign corporation required to file an annual report, classified under the NAICS system, or, whatever this acronym is. They already have to identify if they're engaging in renting or leasing residential buildings or dwellings on a long-term basis. They already have to do that.
No, that's the requirement above. So the requirement F that says in their annual report, they have to identify their industry code, and their industry code would be engaged in renting or leasing residential buildings or residential dwellings on a long-term basis. So they have to, on the annual report, they're going to write down their code. And if that code is this rental, then they have to do the additional form.
So currently, under this registration system, businesses don't have to identify a code.
That's correct.
Okay.
Representative Callamore.
Thank you. So this means that every single entity in the state of Maine will have to identify whatever this code is. And if the code is this code, then they have to give this additional information. But what if we're talking about a lay person? I had an LLC. What if I have no idea what that is? I misidentify myself. Now I'm faced with these penalties. But the other thing is, what if this code changes?
These are great questions, Representative Collmore. And I just wanted to also just backtrack to let you know that I remembered that the firefighters unions testified in support of rental registry bills in the previous iteration. So that testimony is available online to hear directly from first responders. Okay, so to address your question, one thing that I want to say is that part of this bill is giving more support to the Bureau of Corporations staff so that they can help people with these questions that they may have to navigate the system. I also want to say that all businesses, when they file their federal taxes, have to refer to an NA, they have to list their NAICS code. So it's a code that they already know that they would just reference back to the 1040 Schedule C form. So they already know it. The codes are standardized, so they won't change. The only thing that will happen, they're not likely to change. But more codes could be added. Like, for example, short-term rentals don't have a code, so that would be exempt from this because businesses just don't report that currently under federal guidelines. So it's a standardized system that's used by the federal government.
Representative Lookner.
Yeah, I'm still trying to get an understanding here. So the Maine Secretary of State's office, if I'm a LLC, Shirts and Pants LLC, and I register with the Secretary of State, I don't have to tell them that I'm selling shirts and pants or anything about the nature of my business. It's just like I'm registered as an LLC.
There's someone from the Secretary of State's office that would probably be,
yeah, thank you.
Be able to answer that.
I'll ask. Yes, I will invite them up. Welcome back.
Hi, Kathy Bodwin, Director of Corporations, UCC and Commissions for the Secretary of State's office. So currently under the 5 statutes that she mentioned, the annual report requirements, it currently asks for a brief statement of the character of business that you are doing.
But it's not like a standardized
No, it
code
is
like the
not.
NCIS
And I
system
will
you're
say the
talking about.
data is not good data
Okay,
that we receive
interesting.
currently.
Okay.
Yeah.
But but my Shirts and Pants LLC, when I go to file federal taxes, they're requiring me to do
Mhm.
this specific code here.
Yes,
Okay.
it's a federal requirement for a lot, but, so to answer the other question too, is the only entities that, do not file with the Secretary of State's office, are, sole proprietorships and general partnerships currently. So they will file with the town, municipalities.
Representative Cullimore.
So again, I've had an LLC. I've never once had to report this code. We rented commercial property. There was no code I was required to put into my tax. I had H&R Block do my stuff, so they know what they're doing, I hope, anyway, because they continue to do my taxes. So, I don't think that requirement is for everybody. And so I'd be concerned that, again, somebody like me who is just, I'm relying on H&R Block to help me, but what if I don't have H&R Block because I can't afford their fees? And I don't know that I'm supposed to do this code. I just like to know where the code is required and where it isn't, because I never, if I filed a code, I have no idea what it is.
Well, currently it's not required. This bill would require.
No, I meant with taxes. We're being told that when you file your federal taxes, this is required. I've never been asked to provide this as part of filing my federal taxes.
Go ahead, please.
You had a question about enforcement that I did not address, I just realized, so,
I think we haven't gotten to
Okay.
the enforcement
Okay,
section
cool.
yet, and so
Sounds
we'll
good.
get there. We'll get there in a moment. Yeah, more questions. Thank you, Representative.
When you file that report, the state, there is a fee. Am I correct with
Yes.
that?
Yes,
Are we guaranteed there won't be additional fee
there.
with
there's no-
this?
Yeah.
And I think there's going to be added fees to it because of the amount of paperwork and filing that's going to have to be done by anybody that does this. But can we guarantee there won't be any more increase as far as the license goes itself?
This bill doesn't include any increase in the filing fees for annual reports.
And I will point out that there is an appropriation and allocation section on the last page. So that is to reimburse the Secretary of State's office for the costs for this additional work for them. So I think that is the funding that's going to come, that in maybe funding that is coming in place of raising the fee.
and, I'll just add to that question about fees to say that consideration in the crafting of this bill was hoping that we would construct a rental registry that did not put a burden on municipalities, because that's a concern that we've heard over the years as we've, presented something like this, and to not put an additional burden on businesses with fees.
Okay. I'm going to ask can we move on to, no, Chair Gear.
I just wanted to clarify for myself, the different sections, which types of entities are in each one. So you said section 4 is nonprofits and corporations. So unless I'm missing one, that would be C Corps, S Corps, B Corps. Would that be correct?
13B is for nonprofit corporations. And
That's that's for nonprofits. Okay,
Yes.
could you just walk me through each of the
Yeah.
sections? So that's
So
nonprofits.
Section 5 through 8 are from Title 13C, which is
business corporation.
business corporations.
So again, is that S Corp, B Corp, C Corp?
Yeah.
Am I missing? Okay.
Sections 13 through 16, that's in Title 31, apply to limited liability partnerships. Section 17 through 19 apply to limited partnerships. Sections 20 through 25 apply to limited liability companies.
Okay, I got a little behind. Section 13 is limited liability partnerships.
Yeah.
And then what was the next one? Sorry.
17 through 19 are limited partnerships. And then 20 through 25 are limited liability companies. And again, the language in all those sections are identical to the two on the first page, except that the ones on the first page say when a corporation files. The other pages will say when a limited liability partnership files. But other than that, the provisions are the same.
Okay, great. Thanks. Can you speak to enforcement?
Yes, so that's in sections 9 through 12 of the document that you have. And this is in making amendments to Title 14, which is court procedures. And well, you may not know, but court procedures has sections in it that deal with landlord-tenant law. So section 9 says that a person who fails, and a person includes entity. So these businesses that fail to submit the information that's required may not serve a notice of termination for non-payment of rent if they haven't in fact filed that information about the particular rental unit. Right? So I can't terminate. If I haven't filed for your unit, I can't terminate for your unit. If I filed for other units, I'm allowed. And this is termination for non-payment of rent. Then section 12 requires the landlord cannot serve the notice of termination if they have not included a provision. Oh, sorry. No. Section 12 says if they haven't if they serve a notice of termination, but they haven't filed, then there's a penalty equal to 3 times the monthly rent. And then I thought there was a section here that said that they had to have it included on I thought there was a section here that said they had to include a notice. Oh, yes, that they have to include a notice. Sorry, we're going back to 9. Note, I will say, I will limit you to what is on these 2 pages, which is 9, which is, and 12. I will have to think about whether there was another provision that I lost somewhere that required the landlord to actually notify a resident of this right. And maybe the sponsor remembers if that was in there or if I just imagined it. Looks like I may have just imagined it.
So that's the enforcement and the penalties. I also saw like that if someone does file for termination, that was a triple damages of that.
Of the monthly rent, yes, that's in both of those provisions.
There more questions for the sponsors, otherwise we'll shoot for the end of this thing.
Yeah, so again, I'm going to go back to, I'm a 80-year-old woman who has decided by the encouragement of my children to do an LLC for the apartment that I rent above my garage so that I ensure I have an EIN number that is separated. It's what we did because we needed the stuff to be separated from our actual house. And I fail because I'm an 80-year-old woman and I don't understand how to do this. I fail to do this. I can no longer kick the kid out that's living in my apartment if I forget to do this. And so I have to pay them 3 months rent, even though I have to keep paying my mortgage. Is that what this says?
So I again want to reiterate that part of this bill includes staff support at the Secretary of State's office to help people.
But that's what this says.
with
I
the
understand that
filing.
you have that.
The reality of how this failure to register works out, this was put in here as an incentive. There actually is not a mechanism for enforcement, so it would be on the tenant's burden to to basically, to prove that in court. And correct me if I'm wrong. I'm gonna lean on my colleagues here for this correction, but from what I understand, if someone were to correct the information, is there a way to correct the information that's filed with the Bureau of Corporations?
Yes.
If there's been a mistake made or something's been left off?
So.
In here, if you haven't filed the information, you're the landlord and you want to serve a notice of termination, this is in section 9. You can't serve it until 120 days has gone by. So if you didn't file and you want to serve notice, you have to file and then wait 120 days. So it's not a complete ban, it's a delay.
Okay, can I clarify?
Sure.
Thank you.
sure. I'm trying
Okay,
to get us
so-
to discussion as soon as I can.
No, I understand, but I have to understand this in
Mhm.
order to get to the discussion.
I understand.
So I have to pay my mortgage, my housing insurance, my taxes, my water bill that's attached to this tenancy without being able to have a way to enforce because I didn't understand how to fill out a form. And I know you're saying it's on the tenant, but there are really smart people who know how to sue for
Correct. And I do want to say also, given that this penalty doesn't actually have an enforcement mechanism, it's actually pretty weak. And I just want to say to the committee, this bill is just as much yours as it is mine. So if that is a deal breaker, this is something that we can address in the future. But if that is a deal breaker, the main point of this is creating a rental registry. And I also want to say that I do believe that there are already incentives to file with the Bureau of, it's literally your job as an LLC to file with the Bureau of Corporations. So I'm actually very comfortable removing that part of this bill given that it actually doesn't have much teeth and there's no enforcement mechanism. Because the whole point of this bill is a rental registry. So if that, I leave that up to the committee for your discussion.
Representative Looker, is this for discussion or for questions? Okay.
Two questions. So one for the Secretary of State's office. I'm still, just walk me through it. I'm an LLC. I sell shirts and pants. I go on the Secretary of State's website and I type in somewhere, the nature of my business is I sell shirts and pants. But then on your end of things, there's no way for you to tell. Like, it's a narrative form. It's not like a code. You don't like drop down a menu and say shirts and pants store, and then you can easily search it. So you get really bad data, which would be something, and it sounds like you could clean that up. Would be very helpful, potentially. And then so is that correct? Is that a correct
Yeah,
sort
it's just
of
a free form right now. and
analysis?
Some of the data is just ridiculous.
Okay, yeah, sure.
We do
So
everything or.
it would sound helpful to
Yeah.
clean that up. And then I guess for the bill sponsor, I mean, this to me seems like a pretty simple tweak just to kind of fix and clean up some data that the Secretary of State's office is getting pertain some of, and then apply some of that to rentals. And then you have some of these enforcement mechanisms. But would you say that's like kind of a more accurate way to what we're looking at here is we're cleaning up this data that the Secretary of State's office is getting for these businesses.
Yeah, not just cleaning up data, but it's just gonna open up being able to just have industry data on the landscape of businesses
Right.
in the state,
Yeah. So anyway, that makes a lot of sense.
which we can use in the future for other questions we might have, other reports that the Secretary of State's office
And I
needs or
guess
the
just
legislature needs.
one last thing, would there be anything preventing the Secretary of State's office from, like, instead of having a narrative form when I'm an LLC and I'm telling you what kind of business I'm conducting, to like having some sort of a drop-down form? Is there anything that would prevent the Secretary of State's office from just doing that already?
Well, it's gonna require code changes, programming changes. Right now we get just a free form that's existing. And it's not gonna be a drop down. We're gonna have to direct them to the website, the next website, and they're gonna have to, figure out what their code is and enter it in report filing.
Thank you. I think that's all the questions we have for you. I wanted to shift over to discussion, and I've had a request for members to corner caucus. But before we corner caucus, does anyone have any discussion they wish to have? Representative Callamore.
Thank you. So I'm quite concerned that this is not as simple as some people are trying to make this out to be. We have a very huge elderly population in our state. And I am quite concerned that we're going to direct this person to this website to try to figure out what code they're supposed to enter in. And then there's a penalty that they have to pay or not pay, or maybe enforce but not enforce, to be able to collect rent from a tenant. And so
Please, no. I'm sorry, please don't sit there. Because we're past the discussions, or past the questions. So no. I need to be careful on this. We've moved into discussion.
I was trying to raise my hand before you moved into discussion, but I had to check with the Secretary of State's office. I apologize.
So, anyway, I'm just really concerned that, I don't feel like we have to tell the Secretary of State's office that they can ask for a code to get better data. I don't think that we need to do this. So that's my concern. And we've heard that they can change it. They just have to update their stuff. We're going to be asking a lot of people who don't even have internet to be doing stuff that they literally can't do, because I've got constituents that don't have access to internet. We have state representatives in this body who have to drive to their in-laws' house to access internet. This is a huge issue I'm very concerned about. It's something I'd like to be considered as part of the corner caucus, which is why I'm mentioning it now before we go in. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Golick.
Part of the discussion, but kind of a question, sorry. Part of the discussion, but kind of a question that raises, I don't disagree that a lot of people don't have internet access. But how does somebody register this information to begin with, even if they don't have internet access? Seems to me there must be some other options beyond just, I have an LLC too, so I do understand how the registry process works. I just think that there's more ways than just weighing the internet access, which is an issue. It is an issue for a lot of people. So just kind of a question and a comment at the same time. Do you have?
I'm not positive, but I thought that people could register by paper.
Yeah.
So
I think so.
that is an option.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments before we do a corner caucus? Thank you. All right, we're going to take a short break. And we'll be back. Chair Gear.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to propose that we move ought to pass as amended. And the amendment being here today that we would be striking sections 9 and sections 12, so the two enforcement sections. And that is my motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Further discussion? Representative Collmore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will not be supporting the motion before us. I do not think the Secretary of State's office needs us to tell them to put an extra checkbox on their form. I think they can do that themselves if they need better data. And also, we have no idea. Let's see, the fiscal note says 27, 28, question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark, and then the line below it, 4 question marks. So we don't, oh, and general fund question mark, personnel question mark, all other question mark, and no fund status areas. And I can't support something that we don't have full data on.
Other comments? Is the committee ready to vote? Representative Luckner.
Yeah, I'm relatively new to this committee and just kind of wandering into this, but I will say that I've noticed a trend in the legislature in my time here where certain interests really have the resources and the time to get their voices heard in a way that other interests who might potentially benefit from legislation like this, which I think is really necessary, they don't have the resources and don't have the time. And I also think that it's, a lot of the emails that we received on this were saying, this isn't the bill we need. The bill we need is actually increased rental assistance, is a number of, we need to build more housing, which I absolutely agreed with. And by the way, we have had a lot of legislation on those specific bills before various committees. And where are these interests who are telling us to pass these things? They're not there. So I just wanted to say that I think we're really only hearing one side of the story here. Why I'm supporting the ought to pass as amended is because, there are thousands of tenants throughout the state of Maine who would benefit from something like this. And we got to do our best to protect them and ensure they can stay in housing.
Senator Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate Representative Luckner's point of view. And as an even newer member to this committee, and one who wasn't here for the original working of this bill, I just want to say, I think, in reading the materials, I wasn't convinced that there's an actual need here or a coherent benefit that is being addressed by this piece of legislation. And I do think, a lot of the potential benefits are being done at the local level already. First responders locally are collecting the information in a lot of towns, and I think it's a little clunky to do it through the state. I think we should, if that's the benefit, I think there's some that should be done at the local level. I also think that, the market here, there's a desperate need for housing. People with available housing want to rent it. They want the income, and the people who want it are looking for it. So I don't really see there's a market failure here that demands this legislation either. So for those reasons, I'll be voting not to pass.
Is the committee ready for Representative Golick?
Sorry, I just want to make a little bit of a statement on this.
You are completely welcome to.
Well, thank you. One, I don't believe that the Secretary of State would ask us to create law if they could just do it. And I could be wrong on that. I do see a need for this, for data collection, for us understanding. If anything, we have all these LLCs, what they're doing, what they are doing. They're renting units and this other stuff. But with the housing shortage, we have an understanding with the data of how much housing we have and how much, rentals we need and everything else. But without having this extra data, we don't have the accurate numbers on what we continue to need for housing. I am pleased with the amendments that have been suggested. on this. And I do want to say that this isn't the first time that this has been discussed, and just to Senator Bennett's comment about Representative Looker or being new on this, he was on the Housing Committee last session where we discussed this in great detail. Where we did have people from emergency response systems and stuff come out and explain in detail why they needed this and why they needed this information. Because of the experience of being on something, whether it was advocacy or sitting in legislative sessions in the 131st, I will be supporting this bill. I think it's needed. I think it's a step in the direction that we need to continue to collect more accurate data for a housing unit.
Thank you. Any more comments? This committee ready for the vote. The motion has been ought to pass as amended. And that was moved by Chair Gear and seconded by Representative Lookner. Thank you. I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Thank you. Representative Mingo.
No.
Representative Mingo is a no. Representative Mallon.
Yes.
Representative Mallon is a yes. Representative Golek.
Yes.
Representative Golek is a yes. Representative Youssef.
Yes.
Representative Youssef is yes. Senator Bennett.
No.
Senator Bennett is a no. Senator Curry.
No.
Senator Curry is a no. Representative Gear.
Yes.
Representative Gear is yes. Representative Colmar.
No.
Representative Colmar is no. And Representative Lookner.
Yes.
Representative Lookner is yes. And Representative Julia.
No.
Representative Julia is no. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in favor. 5 opposed.
5 in favor, 5 opposed. I think we can, let's just find out what those who are opposed, what their report. Do any of the 5 who are opposed have a report that other than ought not to pass? All 5 were ought not to pass. So we don't know what the majority report and what the minority report will be. It will be members who are currently absent will have 2 business days. So that's Thursday at noon in order to record their votes. Thank you, everybody. That ends our all of our work sessions scheduled. Are there any announcements from our analysts?
No announcements. You all have the weekly schedules, so I'll see you on Thursday.
Great. Thank you very much. And with that, move to adjourn.
So moved.
Second, all in favor.
Aye.